You are watching News 9 Live. I'm Krishna Kumar and I'm being joined by a very special team for a very special discussion, very important discussion. We have with us our Executive Editor Kartikeya Sharma and our Executive Editor Strategic Affairs Aditya Rajkol joining us, and let's begin this. It's an attack on India. The Time magazine has once again peddled hate against India in the garb of news. The Time magazine has carried an article by a Khalistani propagandist to defend Waris Punjab, their chief Amritpal Singh, and in the process defame India. But the bigger question is, what explains the bias in the Western media against India? And why does the Western media weaponize democracies and human rights as issues to attack fully functioning democracies like India? Aditya will begin by understanding this article. The fact of the matter is that the person who wrote this article is a Khalistani propagandist sitting in the US.
Absolutely. There's no denying that there's been an international campaign and propaganda basically spreading disinformation about India and Indian government. Basic fact checks have not been done on this. That Amritpal Singh has been a radical Khalistani being propped up by certain elements. Where is the funding coming on? Now, Time magazine has continuously done this. This is not a surprise for India. We've seen continuously in 2014 and 2019 as well, just before the elections, a Times cover, completely attacking the Indian government. One such headline that came out in 2019 was on Prime Minister Narendra Modi, calling him divider-in-chief. But we know what happened in the elections. Yet again, Modi came even by a bigger mandate to the elections. And just before the elections next year, now continuous series of campaigns are happening on Time magazine, and a radical Khalistani is being given space on its covers, clearly indicating that there is a certain bias, there is a disinformation, there is misinformation, and a fake narrative being peddled against the Indian government. We know for a fact that there's been a law and order concern in Punjab because of a K2 strategy of Pakistan, that the Khalistanis who have completely vanished from the Indian state of Punjab need to be reactivated. Because Pakistan wants a K2 strategy, a two-phase war against India. One in Kashmir, where there has been continuous Pakistan-sponsored terrorism, and second in Punjab, where the Khalistanis had completely been eliminated. Their ideology was completely ended in Punjab. But there's been a certain amount of dissatisfaction, but Indian democracy has mechanisms to deal with that. But what the Time magazine has done is that an open space has been given to a Khalistani radical to peddle lies against India, not realizing the consequences of the same. So this isn't something new. This is that India has dealt with and will continue to deal with. But facts need to be very clear that Indian democracy is being attacked by the Western press, and this isn't something that abides by the principles of a free and fair reportage and press.
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to take this across to Kartikeya Sharma, our Executive Editor, for this. Now, Kartikeya, that Western supremacist attitude has been literally so difficult to get rid of, despite all that's happened in the recent decades. The kind of growth that India has shown, the kind of heft that India has in the world stage today, they just don't seem to get it anymore.
There are a couple of things, but the first point I'd like to state is that I think that the Western academia, and especially the Western media, is trapped in its own cultural past. The cultural past is that they are liberal democracies. But in countries all over the world, we have seen a phenomenon called resurgence of cultural nationalism, people taking pride in their roots. Bharatiya Janata Party is a party which has been duly elected now twice. It has its very clearly stated position of cultural nationalism. Now, you have people who have views on constitutional or civic nationalism. Cultural nationalism was taken to the people. People of India duly voted Bharatiya Janata Party and said, yes, we like the idea of cultural nationalism. One. Secondly, the idea of cultural nationalism was not imposed, Krishna. The issue of cultural nationalism has been part of Indian decision making or part of Constituent Assembly debates from 1947 onwards till 1952. Second thing. Third thing, the idea of cultural nationalism was not forced upon people. It gained legitimacy, it gained ground, Bharatiya Janata Party won and came to power. So that is one. So to say that the duly elected government in India is trying to mimic a sort of a racist government is a blatant lie. This article is poorly researched. It has not put facts in place. Secondly, it has used non-words, wrong words for people. For example, to say that Amritpal is a Sikh leader is a wrong word. He's an imposter. He's a person who has been trained by ISI in Georgia. He has been trained in Dubai. Look at his photographs as to what he was doing. One. Secondly, there was no lockdown of the Punjab state. It was a manhunt. In India, school children are not getting killed because, like America, because they have no consensus on the gun issue. When they talk about peaceful transfer of power, barring emergency, India is a shining example of post-colonial nations. Look at Pakistan, it's a failed state. Nepal, it's a flawed democracy. They can't complete a tenure. Look at Bangladesh, it had dictatorship. Look at Sri Lanka, it had civil war. Look at Vietnam, it had war. Look at Cambodian democracy. Look at state of Myanmar. Look at state of Thailand, which is reeling under a monarchy, which is a huge chunk of money which is ripped away from the GDP, and people can't say the king is in Germany and West at least for quarter of a year. India is a shining example of peaceful transfer of power, which this article is trying to contest as if the institutions are being somehow eroded and corroded. And lastly, what did the world see in January 2021 when the supporters of Trump attacked the vice president then, Pence? So I think the article loses context, and my biggest argument here is that the United States of America, its press, they weaponize words like human rights and democracy to pursue the American strategic interests. Right. They invaded Algeria, right. They invaded Syria, they broke countries like Libya in the name of what? Human rights and democracy. Those are non-functional and destroyed states.
Absolutely. The list is long, Aditya, isn't it? That's really the point that Kartikeya is making. You know, from when you come from that, how do you look at India, which has done it so successfully? For 75 years, how can you look at India and cast such aspersions? And more importantly, all right, if you say it belongs to the person who wrote it, how do you allow that person to come in and write something like that, clearly knowing the profile of the person who's writing it? You know, that's after a point, causing unnecessary, social discontent in India by doing that, because that content gets consumed in India. And many Indians tend to get misled into believing that the whole of America thinks that. But that's one media organization giving a platform to one particular writer.
Well, one needs to realize that the Western press has had an agenda for a very long time. They have always seen India from the prism of this colonial mindset. And they always believed, in the last many decades, even though it's been 75 years of India's independence, the Western press has seen India as a state of snake charmers, which is very known. And they haven't really developed from that particular mindset. They cannot see India as a progressive democracy, one of the largest democracies, and clearly, achieving its goals every passing day. One of the biggest economies in the world. So there are time and again occasions where radical elements, not only radical elements, but terrorists have been given platform by the Western press. The biggest of all examples has been the Taliban's and Haqqani network, Sirajuddin Haqqani, who wrote an editorial in the New York Times. Imagine that. Similarly, we have had several different occasions where even in, when Article 370 abrogation happened in Kashmir, none of the Western press cared to look at the policy as how discriminatory this was, how it was mistreating the lower strata of the society or the women of Jammu and Kashmir. It was not about equality and justice, but the abrogation was about equality and justice. Never did we see them highlight that. Because conflict has been an industry, and the Western press also gains from any kind of a conflict, blaming India completely without any facts or truth to it. So there is no time for truth for the Western press. They do not have the bandwidth or the capability to in fact go into it. And we need to also check the kind of funding they receive, the kind of access that the deep state has to these Western press, and the agenda that is involved with it. There have been several attacks on Prime Minister Narendra Modi, on the Indian government, on Indian democracy, on Indian constitution and Indian parliament. But why? Where are the facts and figures is the biggest question that we are asking here on this coverage.
You see, let me go by what the author has written in the Time magazine. Because the Indian government has decided that capturing Amritpal Singh, a 30-year-old Sikh political activist, is more important than people's human rights. He is not a political activist. He is questioning country's integrity. He is inciting violence.
Yes.
He is talking about secessionism. and he's creating political and social unrest in Punjab.
Yep.
So first of all, that is completely wrong. So it's a poorly researched article. Then second important thing, it says injustices committed by the government against minorities in India. Where is the case? You have to cite an example. This is like a you get up in the morning and you write a fable. It is not like that. Then it goes on to say that the confrontation turned violent. Afterward, protesters claim police officers had charged them with batons. Look what happened in Ajnala. The police showed restraint to a point where senior retired officers said that they should have used batons there. But police had the sensitivity. But I think author does not understand the sensitivity. They had Granth Sahib in front of them. Granth Sahib is considered Guru. It's the most holy thing in the whole Sikh ecosystem. How could police have lathi charged an unruly crowd when Guru, the Granth Sahib, was there? So Amritpal was weaponizing a holy book which is considered a guru. So I think it was a crime committed by Amritpal. So that has not been written. Let's go point by point, I think in every paragraph there are mistakes, but I'm so surprised that the Time magazine has allowed this plethora of untruths to be passed as truth. And then it says, a dashing but a possibly dangerous religious leader. Amritpal, a dashing but a possibly, it's not wacko. This is not the Midwest of America, where you have thousands of acres, people create their own subcultures.
This is not the wild, wild west.
This is not wild, wild west. So this is not wacko, This is something about the Indian security. And Indians know, Indian duly elected government knows how to work on it. And then it says, I wrote about the Indian government's frequent use of anti-national rhetoric to defame social protests and justify human rights violations, including with nationwide protests against Citizenship Amendment Act. One has to understand that Citizenship Amendment Act has a context. It is a context of persecution. Yesterday, a second Hindu doctor has been killed in Pakistan. All of us know what happened after Taliban took over Afghanistan. There has been a Sikh exodus from there. Population of Hindus was roughly around 12%, Aditya, in Pakistan, 12 or 14%.
Yeah, close to that.
Close to that. It was in double digit. It is less than 2% in Pakistan. If India is not going to accommodate them, then who is going to accommodate them? And secondly, it presupposes that the whole state is in unrest. Punjab is a peaceful state. There has been no social unrest after
it just had elections with which had a very peaceful transfer of power, Aditya, didn't it? In that sense, one is that the article is poorly researched on every single count that Karthikeya was just talking about, and the other is the fact that how do you let this happen when the issue is simmering in a country? You're literally messing with the peace and tranquility of a country by allowing this to happen.
Well, the basic simple fact is that the Time magazine or the Western press or the West as a whole cannot digest a vibrant democracy as India, which is continuously rising, economically or otherwise. They just cannot absorb that fact. And secondly, it is a sustained campaign against India's democracy, against India's interests, and India playing a leading role globally and showing the path ahead. Right. We've seen continuously in comparison to India, as Karthikeya was also mentioning, in Pakistan, the state of minorities, the persecution, the human rights violations that is continuously happening. We've been reporting here on News 9 about how Hindus are being deliberately and forcibly being converted in Sindh province of Pakistan by Islamist radicals like Mia Mittu and several others. Not just Hindus, Sikh community and Christians are also continuously suffering. We know of a Sri Lankan, who was publicly lynched in Pakistan. Similar such episodes have happened continuously. Now, this is only about the minorities. This is also about the ethnic minorities, and apart from Punjabis, others, including Baloch, including Sindhis, including Pashtuns, and people in Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Have we ever seen Time magazine or the New York Times or the Washington Post or the Western press as a whole do a sustained campaign or an article reportage on how the minorities in Pakistan are suffering, how there are rebel attacks that are continuously happening, and in Afghanistan as well, how Pakistan has sheltered Haqqani network, Taliban, and several such terror groups that has been conveyed in the United Nations and the FATF as well.
And I think, I have to say this, though it's slightly outside the ambit of this article, but it reflects the bias of the author. There's a bit of an Hindu phobia also. Cultural assertion of an Hindu identity is not opposed to the secular nature of the constitution. Cultural assertion of a Hindu identity through a ritual, feast, procession is not a challenge to a multicultural society of India. Cultural assertion of a lived Hindu life in which you are unapologetic about who you are is not opposed to the ideals of these constitutions. The word secular and socialist were inserted when there was no democracy in India for those 2 years. It was suspended. But was our constitution not secular and not socialistic in nature? India was secular constitution by inception. India was socialistic by its policy. India is a plural society. If you look at the interfaith history of Sikhs and Hindus, it goes more than 500 years. And more than that, I think by using Khalistan or by using Amritpal as a metaphor of anxiety in the minorities, I think author has not done his research. He is a fringe element, a product of Pakistan's ISI, which is trying to foment trouble in Indian diaspora.
Right.
We have been doing a lot of programs, Krishna, together. There has not been one protest in favor of Amritpal. Tell me there has been one rally in Delhi. Tell me one Gurudwara which has come out in favor of Amritpal. All the Akal Takht said was, if you have detained people, release them. And they were released. And they were not sent to long custodies. People who were detained were released. It was a precautionary measure. People do that. Punjab suffered from Pak-sponsored terrorism, and it came out of it.
Right.
And I think Pakistan cannot digest it. The proxies who operate from other countries can't fathom how Punjab is peaceful. Punjab has its own problem, but duly elected government is taking note of it. And even the problem of Chitta, on films and the plays and the songs have been written on it, on drugs. So much of Pakistan, because I really don't want to convert this debate about Pakistan. It's about the poor authority of the author. It is about the poor research of the author. And it is an anti-Indian and it's an attitude which attacks the idea of Indian democracy. It's like I really hate to say that Area of Darkness by Mr. Naipaul, or it is like when the Brits were leaving this country, can India stay as a nation, to challenge us that are we a nation? India is a old nation but a young country. Didn't we have civilizational sense, Aryavrat and other things? So I think the Western academia fails to account for those lived understanding, and that is poorly reflected in it. But my God, to have this article printed in a magazine like Time just shows that how poor the editorial vetting of this institution is.
The poor discretion. And then we talk about the money trail. Once you figure out the money trail, even this article, I'm sure Aditya, if you figure out where the money comes from, then everything will be more black and white than it is.
Well, most of the Western organizations have been funded by various organizations. There are corporate interests, one. Secondly, there is the deep state, be it in US or in Europe, that is involved in this process as well. And finally, there are Islamist and other radical organizations that are openly funding articles, reportage, and the magazine or the news organization as a whole. So one needs to be absolutely clear that this is no, unbiased journalism or journalism of bravery that is being
investigative journalism or
the only investigation here is that we need to investigate where the funding has come from this article, who is propping up or funding Simranjeet Singh, who is the author of this article, and what kind of a Khalistani bias is coming in, and what was the vetting process that was done by this particular organization. Because one is very clear by the fact that Khalistani propaganda is being propped up by Pakistan ISI. And there are elements in US, in UK, Australia, and a few other countries who want to again start this Khalistan violence, law and order problem in Punjab. Till now, they haven't got any success. In the last 5 to 6 years, they've tried their best to pump in drugs into Punjab, to pump in counterfeit currency and ammunition as well through drones and tunnels and other methods. But it hasn't been successful. It hasn't been successful to this extent that they have to hire local gangsters inside jail and outside the jail, and from Pakistan they are coordinating these attacks and propaganda in Punjab.
See, there is another aspect to this controversy, and that other aspect is sometimes we take it for granted that the institutions in West, especially America, are fiercely independent. One, they are not fiercely independent, they are highly polarized.
Yeah.
Yes, there are shining lights. Yes, papers like The Guardian have a board. Yes, they can have their view.
And incidentally, The Guardian was under a slavery cloud very recently.
Absolutely, and they've decided to invest in those areas where they promoted slavery now.
Yes.
After immensely profiteering from it 150 years ago. Now, coming back to this whole issue, we have to understand that the American and the West press is not bias free. Generally in India, people give them a carte blanche. Oh, BBC mein chap gaya. Oh, Times mein chap gaya. Oh, NYT mein chap gaya. Oh, this paper from Washington has published it. I think these were the papers who said that there are chemical weapons in Iraq. These were the very papers who said that there are nukes floating around in Libya. These are the very papers who said that, Assad is about to use low-grade nuclear bombs. These are the very papers who created the so-called opinion, or what we call Indians, the mahal, to attack these countries. So my take is, we give too much of carte blanche, too much of importance to these institutions. As a child, I have read the Time magazine. In the world of 80s and early 90s, when TV and internet was there, what was available? Sunday papers from London, which you would get after 3 days on Tuesday. They would come from Air India. Or you would get National Geographic, Life magazine. That was your window to the world. And if you're very lucky, you would get an edition of the New Yorker or the Granta. I'm telling you, because
that's some time travel, huh?
That's a time travel. I have grown up in that decade, or you would take a 3-month-old edition of Granta for writing. That was your view to the world. Now, but what did that enforce people? What did the ecosystem it created, or sort of a profile of this world? That it's bias free. But I'm saying it's not bias free.
It has never been bias free.
It has never been bias free. It is wedded to the strategic agenda of the West and UK. And what is the strategic agenda? Oil, resources, expansion, territorial presence. I think we give too much of importance to the writing. I think we have got better English writers, we've got better magazines in India, and I don't think any magazine from abroad need to teach us what human rights are all about, when our philosophy is Vasudev Kutumbakam.
Well, Karthikeya, there's a breaking news coming in. In fact, this is ironic. At a time when here on News 9 we are discussing Khalistani propaganda and the West giving space to a Khalistani radical, there's news coming in that a Sikh man has been killed in Pakistan, and this is in Deer colony of Peshawar in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa at 3 p.m. today. This is our Pakistani reporter who is just breaking this development. Now you can imagine that we are still discussing this, and we just discussed that few days ago there have been such killings, but right now, even as we speak, there's a killing of a Sikh minority in Pakistan, and this should be a test case. Will the Time magazine, will the Western press cover this in detail and talk about the minority rights that have been completely scuttled in Pakistan? We'll be perhaps here in this studio again discussing this and bringing you the details of whether Time magazine does this or not, and what kind of a bias is really sinking in.
No, it's about the coverage. How much coverage has Time magazine given that the Sunni fundamentalists have been killing Shias, they are killing Ahmadiyas in Pakistan. You have those random coverage of Sunni bombs exploding in the Shia mosque. But has someone written that Sunni Islam has a fundamental flaw? Has Time magazine written that? Or has Time magazine written that that there's a fundamental flaw in which various sects of Islam engage with each other? No, there is no flaw in the religion. Every religion talks about peace. The flaw is with the person who follows that religion, who interprets those things, who interprets the codes, ethics and aesthetics of a text. The flaw lies with that person. It's like Wahhabism. Wahhabism is not Islam. Wahhabism is a strand of Islam. Coming back to this, the Time magazine, it is an attack on Indian democracy, not for the fact that the article is poorly researched and he says no, Indian state is very hard on the minorities. The article attacks Indian democracy because it fails to understand that democracy in India has created a perfect, equitable, comfortable and due zone for every citizen irrespective of its caste, creed and religion in this country.
That's right. Will there ever be time for truth for those truths? That's the reason why we've been discussing this. And with that, we have completely run out of time here on this particular discussion. Kartikeya Sharma and Aditya Rajkol, thank you so much for joining us on this very important discussion that needs to be had. And thank you so much for watching. With that, it's a wrap here from my side. This is Krishna Kumar signing off. Keep it with News 9.